Welcome back to the IdahoSports.com live state tournament preview special for baseball 2023 edition. Brandon Baney joined now by Lorin Jensen and Scott Burton. They will be our broadcast duo for the 4A state baseball tournament at Skip Walker Field in Twin Falls. It is owned by the College of Southern Idaho, CSI. And so where are all my 4A baseball fans at? First of all, if you're watching this on the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel, Facebook page, or Twitter account, if you would, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, share this, retweet it, because not everybody can be here live tonight. A lot of people are going to come back tomorrow, Wednesday, maybe even Thursday, maybe even Friday to find out how dumb we all were with our predictions. There's going to be a lot of people coming back to watch us. It's easier for them to find with social media algorithms and stuff. The more people, the more likes there are, the more shares there are. So if you could do that, that would be great. And then all my 4A baseball fans, shout out your favorite team, your favorite player, ask us a question, put it in the comments, and we will throw it up on the screen. But for now, we're going to throw up on the screen the 4A state bracket. We had to wait a little extra, Scotty, to get this bracket. There was a bit of a snafu with the Max Preps rankings. Someone incorrectly reported a score, which throws off the entire algorithm, and ultimately nothing ended up changing. But here it is, Scott. Pocatello the 2 will play Wood River the 7. The 3-6 is Twin Falls Bishop Kelly. Bonneville at the 4 against Blackfoot at the 5. That is a District 6 rematch. And then Skyview the 1 against Moscow the 8. What's the number one thing that jumps out to you, Scott, when you see this bracket?
Oh man, if you're looking at Bonneville and Blackfoot, they're going, really? Again? Because they've played 6 times already this season. And Bonneville kind of owns them at the moment, 4-2. And they're both really evenly matched teams. And so when you look at that first round, I mean, I think if you just kind of go right down the list, I just can't help but think it's going to go chalk. The only one that might not is at 4-5. I don't know what you think, Lorin, but that's kind of what I see in that first round.
Yeah, that when I was looking at it, that is the one that you have a question about. Of course, Bonneville beats Blackfoot 2 out of 3 to end the season and win the district championship. But still, like you said, it's 4-2, so it's not it's anybody's ball game. The only other one that's really, well, I shouldn't say the only other one, but the one that really intrigues me too is that 3-6, the Twin Falls BK, just because that was the state championship game last year, and BK smoked Twin Falls in that game. So look for a little bit of maybe a little bit of a grudge match there between Twin Falls and BK.
Well, you know, you look at that game from last year, Twin just ran out of pitchers.
Yeah.
You know, they had really nobody to throw at that point. And Twin comes in this tournament with arguably the best pitcher in 4A in Hardesty. And this kid, if you have not seen him, can flat out bring it. I mean, this kid is throwing under a 1 point. Let's see, where am I at?
0.38, I think.
0.38 ERA with 121 strikeouts to 18 walks. I mean, this kid is solid number one on any squad in the 4A tournament, probably the 5A. Now, you take people's numbers and you kind of have to average it out against who they play. You know, there were some weaker teams in the conference with Twin, and so they had to kind of, you know, play those teams. And if you threw against them, yeah, those numbers would be a little inflated. But this kid right here is the real deal, Nolan Hardesty, and he's going to be fun to watch. It's going to be interesting, though, to see how they use him.
Right. And speaking of pitcher usage, Scott, we've got a shout out from Chris Duke up on the screen talking about Blackfoot's ace, Dax Whitney, on the mound. He, of course, is committed to Oregon State. We know all about what he can bring. And so the question's going to be, you know, where does Blackfoot use him? Because it's almost like a silver bullet. And so the question is, it's always the question, right, Scott? Do you save him for the end, risking the chance that you don't get there? Do you throw him right away against Bonneville, a team he's probably seen 5 million times this year? I mean, what do you do?
Well, you know, and the thing about Blackfoot's a really good team. I mean, they've got 3 guys that can really throw. And, you know, Dax Whitney with that 1.0 ERA, but, you know, they can follow it with Reynolds and Grimmett, who are quality starters on the mound. And so, you know, I really think that matchup is going to be, how did the regular season play out? Was there a certain pitcher that kind of owned Blackfoot against Bonneville and vice versa? Who do you know, I think that plays a lot into it. But, you know, you talk about a dark horse team. And, I think you look at that number 5 Blackfoot as potentially a dark horse because, I think you came into this thinking Skyview, number 1. They were number 1 in the coaches poll. They're, dominating all year. Skyview lost twice to Ridgeview, once to Twin Falls, once to Eagle. And that's their 4 losses on the season, but they got upset in that district tournament. It had to come all the way back through the losers bracket. Now, did that kind of make them human or did that wake them up? And I think that's a really interesting point, and we'll see. But Skyview, their armor it's not impervious. And we've seen people lately beat Skyview. And why not Bonneville? Why not Blackfoot if Skyview's able to get by Moscow?
Yep, for sure. And Lorin, it's interesting in District 3, the different paths that the 2 representatives took, where Bishop Kelly has long been the powerhouse program, right? Defending champs. And they really scuffled in the regular season. They didn't quite play up to what we're used to seeing from Bishop Kelly. And yet they're the team holding the district's championship trophy when it's all said and done. Skyview's the team, like Scott alluded to, that had to battle back through that losers bracket. And I'll just say, pour one out for the Columbia Wildcats. They're one of the 8 best teams in 4A. It's just the way it goes with the district representation. Columbia would have been great to see there at state as well, but unfortunately they lost to Skyview in that 3rd place game. And so Lorin, there's this mystique that's around Bishop Kelly, and they're a very dangerous number 6 seed to me.
Yeah, I mean, at a 6 seed, yeah, they are. They're very dangerous. Probably could easily be, ranked higher, seated higher than they are. And they've got a tough route, though, to have to match up right against Blackfoot right off the bat, and then to turn around, against Twin Falls right off the bat, and then turn around, and if you win, you probably are going to end up playing Pocatello, the number 2 seed, who has a bunch of good pitchers as well. And so, yeah, they've got a tough route, but they're still the team to beat.
Yeah, here's a shout out from Mendel Evans, Twin Falls Bruins. Shout out to all Bruins spring athletes, baseball, softball, and track. Go Bruins this weekend. Yeah, spoiler alert, Twin Falls' softball team is pretty darn good too. And we've got Embassy also saying, don't underestimate Moscow. They're coming on strong. Go Bears. Scott, we always talk about this. It's really hard to judge these teams from the north. And you're going to look at Moscow on the surface and go, boy, their record was putrid. But you have to remember that they are lumped into this kind of arranged marriage with the 5A schools up there in the Inland Empire League as well. And so Moscow took their lumps against Lake City, Coeur d'Alene, Lewiston this year. And so the record's deceiving.
Yeah, it's completely deceiving because they're seeing a completely different ball game than a lot of these other teams are seeing. And so, all of that comes with the point I made earlier about stats. You have to kind of take it with a grain of salt because Moscow stats, including the record, a little inflated, but that's going against those 5A teams that are in their conference, and Moscow coming in hot, really, when you think about it, in that district tournament, they were the number 3 seed, and they beat number 2 Lakeland 6-1 to advance into a best of 3 series with the number 1 seed Sandpoint, and they dispatched to Sandpoint in 2 games, 3-0 and 6-3. So, maybe they're a lot better than that 8 seed, and it'll be interesting to see. I mean, they got some guys that can throw. Kiblin, Anderson, and Isaacson are their main 3 pitchers. And it's really Kiblin and Anderson. Isaacson's kind of a distant third, but they do have some guys that can throw. And if they can get some timely hits, they've seen the pitching. Because those 3 teams that you mentioned in that conference with Lake City, Coeur d'Alene, and Lewiston, all 3 of them have got pitchers, and Moscow has seen them. And so that's why Moscow really is a wild card coming into a tournament like this.
Yeah, Levi Anderson threw a no-hitter earlier this year. So, the potential there.
It's interesting, like you say, with Moscow, because they're the only team of the 8 that are hitting under 300 as a team. Everybody else as a team is hitting over 300. And, pitching-wise, like Scott alluded to, 308, that's the best pitcher, his ERA. But if he's facing a lot of 5A hitters, what's that going to translate to when he gets up to guys of his own, in his own classification? They could be hitting more like 350 as a team, and that ERA could drop down to 1.5. So it's just going to be interesting to see how they fit in.
Lorin, we better talk about Pocatello since we both live there. But the Thunder are very, very talented. And I feel like this is going to sound strange for a number 2 seed, but I do feel like they've flown under the radar somewhat this year because they're in a 3-team district. They've kind of just been doing their own thing a little bit. This is a good team.
Yeah, they are really good. And they're one of the returning teams from last year's tournament as well. They played in the tournament last year, and they ended up getting knocked out 2 games to none, but they've got some experience here. They've got 2 really good pitchers. You've got Birch and Evans that are both, they've had 7 appearances, about 36, 38 innings pitched, and they're still like 0.2, 0.57 ERA. So they've got 2 guys under 1 ERA that's just a phenomenal stat. Again, 3-team district. I have my questions, but they're a good baseball team. They hit it well. They're hitting 355 as a team. So, they pitch well and they can hit well. Those are 2 pretty important things in the game of baseball.
Yeah, Scott, it was a pretty savvy move from Pocatello and Bonneville at the end of the year. Of course, the weather pretty much wrecked the schedule for March and half of April in East Idaho. And so Pocatello and Bonneville got down to the end of the regular season and said, we still have dates to fill. You guys just want to play? Let's do it. And Pocatello and Bonneville met up for what was a pretty interesting late season non-conference tune-up.
Yeah, this season has been so weird, and everybody's going to mention it at some point, is that it's really hard to gauge a team's growth because the growth has had to have happened in such a short amount of time because the weather really hasn't stabilized until recently, and I want to talk about that 1 second if we talk about Wood River. But Pocatello, getting back to them, talking to Coach Benavidez earlier in the week, he said this is one of the most complete teams that he's ever had in his 18 years of coaching, and that guy's been around a long time. And, you look at Pocatello, their only losses are out-of-state teams. They lost to Green Mountain, Colorado, and then a team out of Nevada, Bishop Montague. And, those are pretty solid teams. And that's it for Pocatello. Other than that, they're running the table in Idaho. And you're right, Brandon. I think this is a team that could easily win the tournament. And I'm interested to see if they get past Wood River, which they should. But, you never know. If they do, I'm interested to see if that 2-3 matchup happens in the semifinals between Twin Falls and Pocatello.
That could be a championship most years, and that would be a phenomenal semi if we got there. But let's talk about Wood River. They're the 7 seed, Scott. They have had a rough spring weather-wise. They finally got some home games in, May, I think, finally. But they were the true road warriors this year.
Oh, you talk about Wood River. You don't see them at the state tournament very often. In fact, the kids are on this team. They were 4 years old the last time Wood River was in the state tournament, if that tells you something. But, you talk about the spring and, usually Eastern Idaho comes down to the Magic Valley to play. Their weather was crap. Magic Valley was crap. Wood River was even crappier. It was one of those things to where Wood River didn't practice on their own field until April 25th, and prior to that, their only full practices were in the gym. And, they stopped in at Canyon Ridge and practiced. They stopped at Jerome and practiced just so they could see some dirt. They've had the same number of home practices as they've had home games. That tells you kind of stuff that's going on in Wood River. So they only played 4 true home games plus an additional game at CSI. So they might be the only team that have played at CSI this year as a home game for Wood River. So they have just been road warriors, displaced, and it's just been one of those seasons for Wood River. But once they got dirt and they got it regularly, they found their stride and they started playing really well, including a blowout victory over number 2 seed Minico in the district tournament. So don't sleep on Wood River, but they have a really tough draw with Pocatello. But, kudos to Wood River for getting hot and getting to the state tournament. And you never know. Catch lightning in a bottle, see what happens.
I know there's another team in the Great Basin Conference that likes the slogan "Forged through fire." Maybe Wood River could be forged through weather.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt.
Yeah. All right. Let's take a look at our 4A players to watch. Again, we selected one from each team. It's just kind of a jumping off point here. Cooper Cameron from Bishop Kelly, Dax Whitney from Blackfoot. We already talked about RJ Woods from Bonneville, Jack Driscoll from Moscow. He's actually a student at Logos, private school up there in Moscow, but Logos doesn't have a baseball team. Moscow says, we're glad to have you. Brody Birch of Pocatello, Lauren talked about. Grady Daniels from Skyview's had some good hitting performances this year. Nolan Hardesty from Twin Falls, we talked about on the bump. And Rabbit Buxton from Wood River. He is a stolen base machine. And with a name like Rabbit, you have to. Lauren, who is one player on this list you're most excited to see?
Well, I'm interested to see Hardesty. I know Scott's probably already seen him, but I played at the same high school that Gary Jones coached at a little 2A school, New Plymouth, and there weren't too many guys that we saw that throw like he does, and so I'm really interested to see and what he looks like and what kind of stuff he's got. So that's the guy that I'm most interested in seeing. Scott,
one guy on that list.
Do you want to throw that list back up there again because he stole my dude?
Sorry. I had to, Scott.
You know, I mean, it really is going to come down to the pitching. And, you know, Hardesty's not going to fool anybody. Everybody's going to be watching him. Everybody knows his stats. The number 2 team, Pocatello, Birch, everybody knows about him. I'm kind of interested to see Dax Whitney. You know, I'm a fan of pitching. And if you're going to be an underdog, then you need to step up and pitch. And you need to get deep into the game. And that's what it's going to come down to is can these pitchers, including Dax, if they want a shot. And I really think that Blackfoot could be a dark horse, but they're going to need some pitching, and Dax is going to be a big part of that.
For sure. All right. Well, the 4A state baseball tournament gets underway Thursday through Saturday at Skip Walker Field in Twin Falls, home to the CSI Eagles. And it's also going to be home to Scott Burton and Lorin Jensen as they'll be on the call for every single pitch of the 4A state tournament this weekend on IdahoSports.com. Gentlemen, thanks for stopping by. Oh, yeah, look at that. Looking slick, Scott. You know, everybody's got to show off something. Gary showed off the championship ring. Scott showed off the sign.
Yeah, I was trying to find when Gary pulled that. I should have known, but when he pulled it, I was trying to find something as you were getting ready to come back, and I couldn't find any bling. You know, and I was trying to upstage him. I don't know if my daughter had something laying around. I couldn't.
Tiara.
Yeah, tiara. I should have had a tiara. Dang it.
All right, guys. We'll have a good call starting on Thursday. We will take another break. We'll come back with our 3A state tournament preview right after this. You're watching the 2023 Idaho High School State Baseball Tournament Preview Special on IdahoSports.com.